Morning. Good morning. And good morning. So this morning, I'm going to talk about Chan Zen poet Du Fu. And I'm just going to talk about basically about one line, two lines from his poetry, which are particularly moving, particularly moving. So Du Fu lived in the 8th century in China, and he's a very well thought of poet among the Chinese, although often they don't think of him as a Chan poet, as a Zen poet, but I definitely think he is myself. I better do the talk. I could give you more contextual information, but you can ask that. I'm going to give the talk. So he did his writing. He lived during a huge civil war in China. Quite a bit more death and destruction than our own civil war, if you can imagine it. And he was not a monk. He was a poet who practiced Chan, Zen, and he went through different periods when he was separated from his family during the Civil War. He was isolated. He was a refugee. He got back with his family. Then his family had to run again because the war followed them. And so he had a hard time. He had a hard time. But he still remained connected to what he calls the loom of being, the loom of being, in which everything weaves and unweaves. Everything is continually weaving and unweaving in that loom. Each of us is a weaving in that loom. Weaving, unweaving, weaving, weaving. And now, of course, that's called in Chan, which is influenced by Taoism, also the Tao. It's also called in Buddhism the Buddha nature or the Buddha womb, Tathagata Garbha, Garbha meaning seed or womb. And Du Fu also calls it the raw generative tissue, the raw generative tissue from which all life comes, to which all life returns. And Du Fu seems to have been pretty well read, and he definitely had read Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu, the early Chinese poets from 1100, 1200 years before him. And here's Chuang-Tzu, 1200 years before. The 10,000 things and I all emerge from a loom of origins, and they all vanish back into it. So this excerpt from this poem, which is, I think, in your chat room, if you want to follow it off, and it's on your program, is, now first I'm doing the, just the translation of the characters, then I'm going to do David Hinton's trying to put it together, which is a little controversial, but any translation from Chinese is controversial because there's a multiplicity of meanings. Multiplicity of meanings. Anyway, there is the first one. Loom origins, standing alone. Heaven, loom, enter, human affairs alone. 10th, stand, 10,000 source, sorrow. Here's Hinton's trying to put it together. Tangling our human ways to I stand facing sorrow's 10,000 faces. So this is about sorrow. It's about sorrow. This was a sorrowful time in China, a sorrowful time. A lot of people lost their loved ones, lost their villages. Their villages were burned to the ground. It's a sorrowful time. A lot of people think we're in a sorrowful time right now. Well, remains to be seen. I think it really does remain to be seen. Maybe we'll know in a year or two how sorrowful our time is. But it does seem to many people like we're in a sorrowful time. So, face sorrow, he's talking about sorrow in two ways. One is facing the separation between each other and the world, ourselves and the world, in our what he calls tangling human ways. We get all tangled up in our human ways, and we feel separate, isolated, alone, cut off, despairing. And the second type of separation is that each of the 10,000 things will die. Now, the Taoists and the early Buddhists use the 10,000 things to talk about all life. All life. So whenever you see 10,000 things, they mean all of life. So each of those will die. Each of those will be done. Everything woven into the loom of being is also unleaving. It's unleaving. And awakening to this is we can live with more lightness, with more enlightenment, which doesn't need to be transcendent, but we're just awakened to this looming process, which is very wonderful and very joyful and very energizing, this looming process. But it's also very sad. It's also very sad. So now I want to talk about my own teacher, my own first teacher, Shinryu Suzuki, whom I've talked about many, many times. But I try to calibrate how often I tell these stories. Speaking of enlightenment, speaking of living lightly, speaking of living freshly, speaking of living with some luminosity, I met him in San Francisco, where I live, walking home one afternoon, and he had a grocery bag. And the grocery bag was apparently full of vegetables. I talked about this the other day. Was full of vegetables. And he opened it and he said to me, "Look." And he just seemed so enthusiastic. And I did look, and I was enthusiastic too. Wow, fresh vegetables. And then he said to me, only 2 days old. He had been dumpster diving. He came from Japan during a time not much better off than Tupu's time. And a lot of them didn't have enough to eat. And I can go into that, give a whole Dharma talk on that. And so he had been dumpster diving. But as soon as I heard only 2 days old, I shrunk. I'm from upper middle class, dumpster diving. Only the hobos. We didn't have homeless people then. We had hobos. Remember when we had hobos, not homeless people? Only the hobos dumpster dived. I shrank. And then he said something about coming over to eat. And I said, "No, thank you." And I ran. Now, this is my memory. We tend to embellish on things. I doubt if I really ran. But that's we're actually telling this story the 5th time I'm really running down Bush Street in San Francisco. It's interesting, these stories. So I was burdened by the thought of geez, I didn't want to be, all of a sudden I imagined that there were a lot of fruit flies in the bag, but in retrospect, I don't think there were. But ever since then, that's when I think of the bag, I think of fruit flies. But that again is my own stuff, right? That's my own mind burdened by thought. and the accompanying habit energy, which keeps us burdened by thought. So Zen practice is partly about moving from loneliness, which many of us feel, to a deep place where heaven, Loom, enter human affairs alone. We can only do this alone. And yet if we do it, if we enter it, we feel a wonderful connectedness within the Loom, within the weaving and the unweaving. Heaven, Loom, enter affairs alone, no longer cut off from the process of weaving and unweaving. Tufu calls this the wild, untamed place, where we're no longer cut off. The wild, untamed place. He calls it the wild existence cosmos opening to itself. The wild existence cosmos opening to itself. Then we stand alone, but we're not lonely. We're not lonely. We're appreciating these wonderful colors of the different weaves, the way the fabrics are coming together and developing, and the colors and the forms. And then we're also crying at the unweaving. Oh, but that we're part of that. That is us. Letting the sorrow of the unweaving pass through us. Pass through us. I have more stories about that, but I'm not going to tell them. No longer compartmentalizing. That's what the mind that's burdened by thought does. It compartmentalizes. This is all the weaving loom right here. All the weaving loom. Mind and heart joined. No longer prioritizing logic over emotions. No longer prioritizing impulsive emotions over logic. The heart mind. Chitta in Sanskrit, the heart mind, together, letting the loom weave. Yeah, it's going to weave anyway, so we might as well enjoy it, don't you think? So this is the promise of Tufu, the promise of heaven's loom, the promise of the Tao, the promise of Chitta, heart mind, intertwined process, components of a huge existence, a huge, wonderful existence. Our heart, as I've said lots of times, our mind is usually up here and our heart is down here, but it's all part of heart mind. And once we calm down a little, our mind descends and we feel the luminous. But as long as the mind is trying to control the heart, or the heart is trying to express itself and the mind won't let it, we're missing the luminous of everything. The luminous. And this means not being so caught by shoulds and should nots. Most of the people that I've supported over the years have probably 90% more shoulds and should nots than they need. You need 10%, or you might hurt someone. You might hurt yourself, or maybe you need 15%. But why do you need all these extra ones you're carrying? Jeez, what a life! You're forgetting the womb. You're forgetting the loom, which is weaving and unweaving. Your Buddha nature, your womby nature, which is supporting you always. Dogen calls that whole being Buddha nature. It's not a fixed state. I want to get heart mind. I want to get a taste of what Tim's talking about with heart mind. It's not a fixed state. Sorry. It's the weaving and the unweaving of this life process. And deep joy when we create new weaves. or when new weaves get created around us, and deep sadness when weaves start to unravel. That's part of this wonderful thing, isn't it? Isn't it? To protect ourselves, we fall back on old habits, old patterns, and that's the way we protect ourselves. And we need to protect ourselves. But these separations and schisms, in which make it so the loom's no longer alive for us. We're trying to ignore this wonderful process. But with patience and self-compassion, we can live in a more loomy way. Being with the weaving and the unweaving. We hate it when our old patterns no longer work. When things start unweaving. Of course we do. Of course we do. And I hate it too. Of course we do. Of course we do. So I heard a talk in about 1980 when I was in Boulder, Colorado by Chogyam Trungpa. It was rather notorious. And I'm not going to go into that side of him. But it was a great talk. He was like my first teacher, Suzuki Roshi. He had a luminosity about him that really lit up a room when he was not doing that other stuff, which I'm talking about. I don't like it. So the talk was titled, Regard Chaos as Extremely Good News. Regard chaos as extremely good news. What? Well, that was a wonderful talk. It was a wonderful talk in which I could feel his luminosity. Just like I could feel the luminosity of Suzuki's joy at those 2-day-old vegetables. You know, we feel this stuff even if we haven't been sitting a long time, although by then I have been sitting a long time. This is wildness, this chaos. We don't like chaos. We think, oh, I like wildness, but get out in Wind Rivers in the middle of a storm without a sleeping bag. Do you really like wildness? Not so much. Not so much. But Trungpa Rinpoche says we can regard chaos as extremely good news. The broader weaving beyond our little fabric. It feels like it's wild and out of control. But to get rid of chaos is to prevent change and transformation. Without change, transformation, there is no order. My biggest enlightenment experience was feeling the great freedom which came from embracing the total loss of my brother 40 years ago. I still talk about it 40 years ago. I still have this pain in mind. Still it hasn't gotten that much better. When we grieve, we really grieve. There may be no end to it. There's sorrow all around. But sorrow and grieving are part of life. Part of life. It was 40 years ago that my brother hung himself from a locked ward in a mental institution in California. More than 40 years. And then I came and sat here every morning, still, during that time. Not in this room, because this room was what the garage or the lawn, or what it was in that little room there, which felt pretty woomy at the time. Sat every morning. And it was difficult. It was hard. Facing the bare wall. And it drew me deeper, deeper. My techniques didn't work. I had to go back to Shikanta's. None of the techniques would work because I was grieving. So I had to just be with it. I had to allow myself to be immersed in the darkness of my pain, the darkness of my despair and hopelessness. And I did that. And when I talked about this the other day, I said I did it for years, but I misspoke because I think I only did it for a year. But the fact that I misspoke, that my unconscious said I did it for years, kind of means I'm still doing it. Don't you think? Your unconscious is pretty intelligent. But that's part of the weaving and unweaving of life. And of course we do. We feel despairing in the people we lose and losing our own facilities, faculties. I'm barely hanging on to a few faculties with the help of my friends. I can sit in this chair. I can basically see my notes. Not like I used to be though. Gate, going. Weaving and the unweaving. But the darkness that I felt, which was very hard and scary, terrifying, turned into a softness, turned into a womb-like softness, soft generative fabric of being. And everything got dismantled, but a wonderful clarity came from that dismantling. My role as an overprotective brother, 10 years older, got totally dismantled. Totally dismantled. My anger at my brother for doing this got totally dismantled. For doing this to himself at 30 years old. I was pretty pissed at him for a long time. Totally dismantled from my son. My anger at my father for starting the whole thing, for being responsible for everything, which I won't go into, got totally dismantled. Even my feelings of shame and guilt got totally dismantled. And at that time, we were studying the merging of difference and unity with Katagiri Roshi. Within darkness, there was light. Within darkness. In darkness, there is light. Weaving and unweaving. Unweaving and weaving. Where else do you expect to find the light? Within the darkness. Of course, of course, of course. And we need a sanctuary to fully enter the darkness. We need a sanctuary. Dufu's was his poetry. His most prolific years were the years of the height of the Civil War. And he would always find a place to go and be quiet, close to nature, and sit and then write. And here's another excerpt from it. This is a poem entitled Array, Delight, Lament. Array, Delight, Lament. Early in winter, across 10 prefectures, noble homes, their children bleed now into array delight. Blood making water in the marsh. Night open wide, skies crystal in depth, the battle gone silent. It was his sanctuary, his writing. Mine was a cushion, just a stupid little black cushion facing a blank wall. It was my sanctuary. It was my sanctuary. Exposed and scoured by grief in my sanctuary. Sanctuary. Exposed and scoured. Shikantaza, no technique. Yikes, no technique. Yikes. Out of that comes possibility. Wonderful possibility that we can live, that we can support each other, that we can really appreciate this weaving and unweaving and see the multiplicity of colors that are woven together and be participate in our own weaving, which is part of this big weaving. This means falling into an open expanse, which we can, this wonderful possibility. In darkness, there's light. Wonderful possibility. Great possibility. And of course, as I said, when I was talking about this before, the possibility for me was to find other people. I was already a mental health professional, find other people who had lost loved ones to suicide in locked wards and try to create alternatives in the community so that people didn't have to get locked up when they're having a mental crisis. So I spent 20 or 30 years doing that. It was my ray to life that came out of the darkness. But it was a group of us. We always need a group. We always need a sangha. We always need a friend or several friends to do this practice. Or it's just, it's an aloneness which is just lonely, just cut off. And here's another. Oh no, I'm gonna say this now. I see what my notes are telling me to say. I say my eyesight is still good enough. Although it is deteriorating. I've had cataract surgery and it's still deteriorating. Wait till you get to be my age. Oh boy. Oh boy. Anyway. This is what my notes say. My notes say all the things we love die. Well, I already said that a lot of times, so I don't need to say this again. All 10,000 things will bring us sorrow. They will. They will. Maybe you develop a relationship with this tree out here. This beautiful, beautiful birch. I think these are birches. Are they birches? Yeah, that John Brune has so lovingly cultivated. Well, they're going to lose all their leaves in the fall. There'll be nothing but wide sticks. No. No. Even vegetables from the dumpster. I ran into Otohiro the next day, Suzuki's son, and he said, "We had great soup last night, Tim. We miss you very much." Great soup not last night. They miss me very much. Whoops. Whoops. I didn't know what to say. I said I was busy. I was busy. Who foresees all this in the midst of a war-torn land? It's generative energy in the 10,000 sources, coming from the 10,000 sources, returning to the 10,000 sources. This origin of tragedy, sorrow, and laughter, and joy. And of course, even within this web, as human animals, we're subject to the predator-prey dynamic. We want to stay alive, and we have a strong urge to stay alive. And much of life, especially in the 9th century in China, was eat and be eaten. The 8th century China, eat and be eaten. So we need to realize that that's also part of the fact. That our tribalism, that our focusing on our own needs are part of the loom. That's how the loom keeps moving. And none of us will ever be entirely free of it. Called the 3 poisons in Buddhism. We do. Whether we like it or not, we push away those things that threaten us. And we pull toward ourselves those things that support us, and we ignore everything else. Greed, hatred, and delusion are the fancy words for just this push, pulling, and ignoring. No, we do, because we do want to. We have a survival instinct. All of us, human animals and unhuman animals, have a survival instinct, and that's part of the loom. So we can't kick that out. We need to notice that, acknowledge that. But beyond that dichotomy of predator-prey, the loom is creating beautiful things, wonderful things. Heaven loom, enter human affairs. Alone stand 10,000 source sorrow. Our mind organizes depend on patterns in the loom that we have woven to protect ourselves. Patterns of habit, patterns of meaning, patterns which keep us from being prey. So those aren't bad patterns. We don't want to, everybody wants to kick out those patterns and become enlightened. Well, what do you think enlightened is? It's the whole fabric. You can't kick that stuff out. Probably on my deathbed, if I'm in pain, I'll go, probably. And I have stories about that too, but I won't tell us today. And underneath that is our own wild nature. We can each fall into, within darkness, there is light. We can each fall into that. We can each die to the single weave that we're focused on for self-preservation and open up to the big one that is encompassing it. We can. We don't need to cramp the loom making, but actually we can't cramp it anyway. We can't cramp the loom weaving anyway, so. So as Chan meditators, Zen meditators, but if we were ancient China, we call ourselves Chan meditators. Can we just sit with whatever happens equanimously? Can we just sit with Tufu's the arrayed light of the cosmos awakening to itself? Can we see, can we feel? That's our very own arrayed light. It's your arrayed light, it's your arrayed light, it's mine. It's you guys, it's the movie we're going to do this afternoon with a couple of my friends. It's the arrayed light, the weaving and the unweaving. So that's what I want to say. And I see we have some time, so I'll be glad to take questions or comments from anyone.
Tim?
Yes.
Could you talk more about how we can't cramp the loom? Like, how can't we?
Well, usually again, life is hard for human beings. And it's probably hard for animals too. We are human animals. Life is hard. And so we tend to focus on our particular weaving, the weaving of our family and friends, and want to not ignore the weaving that's going on beyond that weaving. But we can't cramp the loom even if we want, because it's doing its own weaving. Let's just enjoy it. Let's just be part of this array delight. And every time we're cramping it, coming back, even if it's the darkness, if you come back to the darkness and nurture that darkness, that's where you find the light. I'm sorry, you won't find it anywhere else. That's where it is. But that darkness doesn't have to be brittle. Remember, it's Tadagata in Buddhism, the Buddha womb. Womb supports you, but it's totally dark and you don't like it. Did I deal with what you're talking about or not? No, I don't think I did.
I'm thinking of a follow-up. I don't know. The only thing that I can think of is that maybe, like when we try to cramp the loom, we suffer for it.
No, good. Say more about that. Yes, I think you're right.
It's like denying reality.
Yes, that's right.
It's like not accepting what is.
That's right.
The loom is going to do the thing.
Right.
Is that what I'm saying?
That's right.
The loom is thusness.
Yes, the loom is thusness, and we need to recognize when we're trying to cramp the loom. We need to recognize that and accept it, but often we can't accept it. And then we need to go deeper. Why can't I accept it? Why am I shoulding and should nodding this? I'm accepting it. I've accepted it enough. I shouldn't. You know, oh yeah, I practice recognizing, accepting, but then we need to inquire more. What's going on at a deeper level? At a deeper level, my grieving, a lot of my grieving was about the way my own father raised me. But I had to really go through that, recognize it, inquire and accept. And I'm not talking about, this sounds like psychotherapy. Really, I'm not talking about psychotherapy. Yeah, do psychotherapy. I used to be a therapist. I'm just not talking about that. You understand? Yeah.
But I have a question. For example, when you try to accept that darkness, you also know there is present the light. How find a balance between accept that darkness, accept there is light there, but nurture the light, knowing that I need to leave this darkness when I'm there, when I'm in that moment of darkness and finding this light.
Well, I can't really say that, but I don't want to oversimplify this. I do want to say that sometimes the darkness is so severe that, and we're not in a place of seclusion. We're not in a place where we feel nurtured, and maybe we do need to kind of get out of it for a while. So I want to qualify that. See, I had a sitting practice for years already. I had a community here. I had a teacher, but sometimes we just need to, get right of the darkness because we don't want to get into chronic depression. You start to get into chronic depression. Do you understand? Yeah.
Like nurture the light in that moment.
That's why I talk a lot about the three-legged stool, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. We need a teacher or a mentor, that's Buddha. We need to have a friend when we're feeling darkness who we can just be with and can be there for us, that's Sangha, or two friends or a whole bunch of friends. And we need, that's Sangha, excuse me, and we need Dharma, we need a teaching that supports us, like Tufu. Now, I don't know if I read Tufu 50 years ago, I think I would have put the book away because it's just too much for me. I didn't need that book after my brother's suicide. In fact, good nobody handed me that book. I just wasn't ready for it. Does that make sense?
Tim, Cody had a question online.
Oh, Cody. Hi, Cody, where are you?
Hi, thanks, Tim.
Oh, sure.
I feel like it kind of got answered in part, but I'll fire away anyway. Yeah, what do you think is a more enlightened way of relating to, like you talked about, relating to our patterns, our defenses, these blockages we have? Is it just to kind of see them, which meditation Zazen provides the occasion for, and then to still kind of remain open? Or how do we relate to these things?
That's just right. See them and remain open. See them and remain open. I know it seems too simplistic to you, but I don't know anything else. If we really want to go into this, we have to see and remain open. And often, again, we see a little bit, and then we said, I shouldn't see anymore because I've been sitting for 84 years. Past that, I accept everything. But then we're not. So it's the looking, not only the superficial seeing, but the deep looking. But Cody, if you're not you need to be in an environment where you feel safe to do this. And that's why we have what we call the triple treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. If you don't feel safe, you can't do this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Sure. Jerry.
Yeah, you've spoken of venturing to the darkness, but that's just one color of the weave. Because the other color of the weave.
Pardon?
The colors of the weave are not only dark colors, they're bright colors.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Thankful
Yes, the weave, it's a ray delight. It's delight at the colors in that back. I mean, I saw the delight. I was delighted at first when I saw the tomatoes and the chard and the rutabagas. I mean, he really had a potential feast there. I was delighted at those colors until he said 2 days old, and then whoops, you know about this, Jerry?
But yeah, those positive moments give us another doorway
Another what?
another doorway.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Oh, Barbara.
Looms have equal wax and equal numbers. And so I think if you look at the symbol of the loom, you should also keep in mind the certain balance.
Uh-huh.
And so when you are in darkness, having the think that the light is always there in an equal number makes it easier to reach for it. Because when you're in darkness, it's an effort.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right.
Thank
you. Yes, thank you. The third ancestor calls this trust in harmony. You start out by trusting in harmony, even though you don't experience it. But you trust it enough to just to start doing the practice. Ah, Margaret. Can you speak a little louder?
Not knowing is part of it too. That, you don't know what's gonna come out of the situation. It's really a good direction for your life. Yeah, I see it as
Oh, I completely agree. I didn't see anything positive coming out of this. My brother's dead. I saw nothing. No, I completely agree. So, but this is trust and harmony. This is you're trusting this practice of just being present with what is in a meditative way, in a sanctuary. We don't know how much Tufu even meditated. He doesn't even talk about meditation, but he does talk about this sanctuary of his writing, being in nature, being still, being open, not being caught by before and after. And I think maybe that's one reason he's not esteemed like Hanshan is. Hanshan, because he's not ordained, he's not on some lofty mountain, he's just in the middle of this chaos, and we don't even know if he meditates. When we follow someone, we don't even know if they meditate. Is meditation the be end and end all of this? I don't think so. I think that the be and end all is finding a sanctuary, treating our psyche and treating our world as a place where we can find sanctuary. And then living from that. Because we all will be experiencing more darkness. Even if things are okay politically, democracy survives. So other people? Lawrence. Hi, Lawrence.
Talk Tucson about a month ago. We talked by a Catholic priest. And there's some things that I like about the talk. I can't remember the word. But anyway, so afterwards I want to see the word about the lead and who is leading. And I said, well, I really like the talk. And then I said, I was kind of inclined towards them, like that to send. And so then he came up and he said, so Buddhism is escapism.
So it's escapism?
He said,
You should send a book by Tofu. I mispronouncing his name.
Anyway, anyway, so I was kind of stopped there because I was kind of sort of, let's find some common ground here or something. But so what would you say about that? What you said?
Well, what would you say about it?
Well, I said, no, I thought it was just the opposite.
No, that's right. That's right.
How would you put that? Maybe
That's how I would put it. It's Zen is really about not bypassing anything. Although the qualification is sometimes we need to bypass. We do. We're not ready for it. So anything we say about Zen, the other side is true too, because in darkness there's light. In light there's darkness. But basically, I would tell them that Zen is not about not bypassing anything. But then if he wanted to go on and on, I would say, well, yeah, and sometimes we need to bypass. Because we do. Because it's just too much. And then we do. And then we're taking care of our own little weave within the larger weave. By bypassing the chaos from the larger weave unweaving. Oh, I can't take that right. So then you need to bypass. Anyway, both and.
I thought he was referring to the idea of in Buddhism, that sort of a common perception of nirvana.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Escapism.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, in Christianity, the heaven, he's sort of escapism.
Then what?
I mean, there's the idea of heaven.
Yeah.
So that seems Anyway, it's kind of a brief and
yeah. Well, if he was thinking about a profoundly dualistic sort of Buddhism, I get that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, ours is not like that. I say that unfortunately because this is not easy. Understand what I mean? It's not easy. But it's not hard. Array to light. Array to light. Everywhere. Everywhere. Yeah. So, Ruzan.
Just a little, I just wanted to share an interesting fact. I really enjoyed Tufu's writings, and I'm not a poetry guy. So the world famous haiku master Burkett traveled few hundred years later after Tufu.
Yes.
And he had like the clothes on his back and what he could carry in his hands, and he didn't have anything else. And the story is that when he passed away, in his few possessions was a book of Tufu's poetry.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Apparently.
Oh no, I did read that somewhere. Yeah. Yes, he was influenced by Basho. Yes. I mean, he was influenced by Tufu, and I think I've actually talked about a couple of lines of a poem from Tufu, which almost seem copied by Basho, about tears in the eyes of fish, which sounds like anthropomorphizing fish, doesn't it? But anyway, the same thing about the sorrow in the middle of joy in the middle of sorrow. Thank you. So let's see, is our time up? It's we do have a little more time if you'd like to bring anything else up, tell a story. Yes. Susan.
So this is more just a little contribution. I was thinking of that Lord Van Hopkins poem that begins Margaret by reading.
Oh yes.
Golden Rose.
Yes, can you say that? Can you?
I wish I could say it.
Well, speak loudly for the people online and for me, and say what you remember.
Margaret. Golden Rose. Unleaving. It's the sorrow we were paid for. It is Margaret.
Now who wrote that?
Gerard Manley Hopkins.
Oh, really? Gerard Manley Hopkins. Okay.
I'll
Finding all these poets. I want to teach all these poets, but I'm already 81. Because they speak to us, don't they? Whether they had a meditation practice or not, they really speak to us about deed.
He was a Roman Catholic priest.
He was a Catholic priest. Well, I think I'll turn it over. Well, no, I'll see if any more. We do have a little more time. Anything more? Anybody more online? Okay, I'll turn it over. Thank you. This was a great Array Delight pleasure, and I hope you'll stay for the Array Delight sweets. Although I will not be eating any because I am trying to discipline myself. Sweets, that's part of my weaving right now. And of course, I might violate this. You never know. Anyway, thank you.